Hey everyone, my name is Ian. I am Ian the Reader, and this is my first ever Booktube video. I am so excited. I've been wanting to do this for years, you guys. I have been watching Booktube since about like 2014 or so, but I don't know. I never decided to give it a try. Part of it was like, I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to like video editing or things like that. And the other is like, do I really want to be on camera? But you know what? I've been really enjoying watching Booktube again lately. I've been watching wonderful Booktubers like Library of Alexandria and, Daniel Green, Murphy Napier, Jimmy Nuts, people like that. And they just all seem to be having such a good time while they're making Booktube videos. And I really wanted to, be a part of that. I think it's a lot of fun watching them and commenting on them. And I've always wanted to do this, so I'm really excited to start on this journey. Thank you so much for being here with me. So, I thought it would be great to just go ahead and start off with a September wrap-up. That way I can let you guys know what I've been reading lately, and just kind of you can get a feel for, what genres I like. I feel like this month I read a lot of my favorite genres, which was really cool. And so I thought it'd be great, just to start with the September wrap-up. So as I am filming, it is September 27th, so there's still a few days left in the month, and I may finish maybe one more book, maybe two. But the two books that I'm in right now haven't really hooked me yet, so I may put them down and start something else. I'm not really sure yet, but I figured now was a good time to go ahead and film my September wrap-up since I know for sure these are the books that will be done. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I finished 9 books in September, which is pretty good for me. That's about average, I would say. Of those 9 books, 3 of them were fantasy, 2 were mystery, 1 was a contemporary, 2 were horror, and 1 was classic. And then with those 9 books, my ratings were, I had 1 3-star book, 2 3.5-star books, 3 4-star books, 2 4.5-star books, and 1 5-star. I don't really give out 5 stars too often. If I do, typically it's either a book that really blew me away, or like if it's a series that I'm really invested in and really committed in, I know like every book is going to be 5 stars or something like that, then I give out 5 stars. But yeah, so I had 1 5-star book this month, and I think that's really great. And I read a lot of really wonderful books that I'm excited to talk about. So, how we're going to do this today is I'm going to start with my least favorite book of the month and work my way up to my favorite book of the month. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, my least favorite book of the month, I don't have a physical copy of. It is called Faithless. It is the 5th book in the Grant County mystery series by Karin Slaughter. Now, Karin Slaughter is pretty well known for like her standalone mystery thrillers, like The Good Daughter, I believe, is one. Pretty Girls is another. And there are a handful of standalones she's really well known for, but I had never read any of her books before, and I knew she had this series of mystery books called the Grant County series that leads into a bigger series of hers, and so I was like, you know what, let's just start with that. And I started that series randomly in August, and I zoomed through the first 4 books. I could not put them down, and then I picked up the 5th and 6th book as my first 2 books for September. Now, with these books, I'll warn you, if you haven't read any Karin Slaughter before, enter with caution, because she does not sugarcoat anything. The crimes and the murders and the crime scenes are grotesque. They are disgusting, to be honest, and she really digs into like the evils that exist like in normal communities and things like that, and it's pretty gut-wrenching at times, but at the same time, it was a really, really well-done series, and I enjoyed it. But that being said, like I said, Book 5, Faithless, which is the penultimate book in the series, was probably my second to least favorite. I rated it 3 stars, so it wasn't bad, but it was just a little bit slow. There were some character things that I was a little frustrated by, because like things had been kind of building throughout the first 5 books, and I was really hoping we would kind of get to a certain point with the characters before like the last book, but she just spent too much time with it, and it was a little bit too slow burny of a thing for me, so not my favorite, but it was still a good time. So that is my 1 3-star book of the month. So going ahead and getting into my 3.5-star books. In September, I read Nosferatu, which was my first ever Joe Hill book, which I was very excited about. I've been wanting to read a Joe Hill book for a long time. You'll learn about me as time goes on that I'm a really big Stephen King fan. I haven't by any means read all of Stephen King's books, but I have read like somewhere between 20 and 30, which for any other author that would be like a lot, but for Stephen King that's like less than half. So, but all that to say, yeah, I picked up my first Joe Hill book this month. I was really excited about it, and while it was good, I was a little bit let down, I'll be honest. Nosferatu and Joe Hill in general have really been like hyped up in the circles of people that I read and things like that. Everyone was saying I was going to love Joe Hill, and while I did enjoy it, it just wasn't quite what I was looking for, I guess. in some ways it definitely did remind me of Stephen King's prose and like things like that, and it's definitely like horror. But with Nosferatu, I guess it just kind of lacked a little bit of the drive that I wanted. It was a little bit too messy, I thought. It was definitely like creepy and eerie at times, but it just wasn't all there for me. I'm still really excited to get into more of Joe Hill's content, and just to read some of his other books, particularly like I think The Fireman is one I really want to read, and Heart-Shaped Box, I think it's called. Things like that. I'm very excited to read those, but for me, Nosferatu was a 3.5. It was good, not great. Alright, so next up is another book that I don't have a physical copy of. This was an ARC that I got through NetGalley. Now this book is called The Silent Woods, and it was by Kimi Cunningham Grant. Now the thing about this book was I really enjoyed it. I thought the themes in it were really well done. I thought that the characters were really wonderful and their relationships were really complex and interesting. My biggest issues with this book, one, were just like kind of the pacing a little bit. I thought the pacing was a little bit off. And two, this book is marketed as like a mystery thriller, and I think honestly that does it a disservice. And I hate it when that happens, you know, when publishers or whatever kind of market a book in this certain audience for this certain like sphere of readers, and it's just not actually that. So just to dig into it a little bit, The Silent Woods is about a man named Cooper and his daughter Finch, who have been living in isolation in the woods for the past like 8 years or something like that. They have not had like any contact with the outside world. Something happened before the start of the book that prompted them to go into hiding. They're kind of like on the run in a way. And Cooper has a friend who brings them like supplies and things like that once a year, who makes sure that they're taken care of and things like that, and they live on like a farm kind of thing in the woods, so they have resources to pull on that, you know, help them to survive. But one year his friend doesn't show up, and so they are then left to figure out, what are we going to do, how are we going to take care of ourselves, how are we going to survive the winter that's coming, and things go and escalate from there. I think there were definitely some like mystery aspects to this book, but by no means would I consider it like a thriller. This is the one that I called a contemporary in my kind of description of what I read this month. And I honestly think that does it more justice than a mystery thriller, because I think when you say, oh, this is a mystery thriller, you have certain expectations of how things are going to play out, and that just wasn't the case. Like, honestly, it wasn't. So there you have it. I enjoyed it. I just wish it had been marketed a little bit differently, so my expectations had been adjusted. So next up is another... no, we're actually moving on to our 4 stars, so that's exciting. So the next 3 books were 4-star reads for me. I'm really excited to talk about these. The first of which is my classic of the month, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Now, this book has been on my radar for a long time. I've been wanting to read it for a while, and I actually tried to read it with my in-person family book club, and none of us could get into it. It is a little bit slow, like the pacing and the writing is a little bit dense. So it's a bit hard to get into, but I really wanted to commit to it, partly because I found this really beautiful cover, and I just could not turn it down. But also because it is Hispanic Heritage Month, and I am actually 50% Hispanic, believe it or not. And I just wanted to pick it up, so I did, and it was a really interesting experience. So 100 Years of Solitude is this beautiful story that tells the tale of these generations of this family, the Buendia family, that live in this, you know, fabricated town of, I think it's called Macondo. But with that, yeah, so it's all fictional, but it kind of is surrounded by the history of this time period. Now, it's really interesting because as you're reading it, you don't really know what time it's taking place, because at the start of the book, he talks about how, like, you know, in those years of his childhood, this first narrator's childhood, how, like, they didn't have a lot of names for things, and so they could only describe them by pointing at them, which makes it sound like it's, like, you know, some way back ancient time or whatever, but then you start to understand that that's not actually the case, because, like, these travelers will come and they'll bring, like, different inventions to show them, like, ice or whatever, they call it an invention, which kind of shows you, like, where the frame is at of, you know, their perspective on things. But then also, like, telescopes and things like that, and so it's like, okay, obviously we're not in ancient times, but what time period is it set in? And you don't really fully grasp that for most of the book. But yeah, so it was very strange. It was really beautifully written, and it was very atmospheric, I will say. The thing about this book is that was kind of hard for me as a reader to, like, get into, is it follows a lot of these generations of this family, but a lot of them have like the same name, like through the generations, like they name each other after, or like they name their sons and daughters after themselves. And so it's really hard to figure out like, okay, who am I actually following? And so you kind of have to like distance yourself from that. Like it's not so much about the characters as it is like the situations. And the interesting thing is like the three like main names that are used and reused throughout time in this book, they have like similar characteristics to their namesakes. And so you kind of follow the broader picture of this family rather than like individual characters. It was really beautifully written. I do encourage you to give it a try if you've ever thought about it. But yeah, it is not an easy book to get into by any means. So yeah, for that reason, it was a 4-star for me. I really enjoyed it most of the time. So, all right. So next up is a book that has been really, really hyped, all on like Goodreads and YouTube and Instagram, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen this book pop up in like people's year-end lists and favorite books lists and things like that. I've seen so many 5-star reviews, and so I definitely had high expectations going into it, and I think that really kind of played against it in some ways. Now, I still gave it 4 stars. It was still really good, but it wasn't like as mind-blowing as I thought it was going to be, which, you know, take that as you will. You may love this. If you haven't read this, like, where have you been? Just kidding. I mean, I just read it. But The Invisible Life of Addie Larue, if you don't know what it's about, follows this girl who is basically immortal in that she lives throughout time, but the problem is no one will ever remember her. She has this curse on her that came about through certain circumstances, and basically she lives forever, but anytime somebody like leaves the room after having talked to her, they forget all about their interaction, and so she has no relationship, she has no friends, she just kind of wanders throughout time like a ghost. And it kind of follows like her in modern time and her in the past, and it kind of delves into like when things start to change for one reason or another. And I thought it was really beautifully written. I thought the atmosphere of the story was really great. My main issues lie with pacing again, but also like there were just some like logistical things with like her curse or whatever that I kind of had an issue with, which I've talked to like some friends and family members of mine who have read it, and they kind of like talked me down from that. But like, so okay, I'm just gonna talk about this. So if she talks about how she's had like different like romantic relationships, you know, one night stands or whatever throughout her time, and I just don't know how that works, because like she talks about how she wakes up with them in the morning and they don't remember, but like if she's going back to somebody's place, like what if they go into the bathroom or they have to go brush their teeth or take a shower or whatever? Like, do they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, who's this person in my room? Like, how does that work? Because in other instances in the book, like she'll be having a conversation with somebody, they'll walk away, come back, and like they won't remember her. But in these instances, like that didn't happen. Like, I just have some questions about that, and maybe like that stuff that happens off page more often, but you'd think she would have at least mentioned it. So that bothered me, but that's just like a small dumb thing that bothers me. More than anything was like the pacing just kind of dropped it down a little bit for me, but I thought it was really beautifully written. I thought it was really well done and well executed, and it was a good time. So yeah, I do recommend it. Okay, next up, my next 4-star book is Fool's Quest, which, oh man, let me tell you, this is book 2 of the Fitz and the Fool trilogy by Robin Hobb, but it is also, like, I think book 15 in the overall realm of the Elderling series. Now, I have been working my way through this series with my wife. We're both reading it for the past, like, 7 months or something like that. And it's been a really great time. I've really enjoyed it. I think this trilogy, this final trilogy, which this is the second to last book in all of the Realm of the Elderlings books. Now that I finished this, I just have Assassin's Fate, which I'm kind of putting off because I don't want it to end, and also because it's like freaking humongous. But with Fool's Quest, I liked it a lot. I liked the choices that Robin Hobb made. I liked the characters that we have been introduced to in the previous book, as well as, you know, my old favorites that have been here since day one. But again, the pacing. Robin Hobb, I love you to death, but sometimes you just take too long, you know what I mean? So like there was a cliffhanger that took place at the end of book 1, which is called Fool's Assassin, I think that's what it's called. But yeah, there was like a big cliffhanger or whatever, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen to these characters? And then Robin Hobb takes like 200 pages to get to the point of like what's going on with them. So that was a little bit frustrating for me, and it just, you know, bothered me. And that's like part of the reason why I'm not giving it 5 stars. The other part isn't even Robin Hobb's fault. ish. And that's that I cannot stand the audiobook narrator for this final trilogy. So the frustrating thing is, like, these characters have been here a long time, but each series has like a different audiobook narrator, which wouldn't bother me so much if it weren't for the fact that, like, they pronounce names differently from each other. They do like weird voices that don't match the characters' personalities a lot. And you know, in previous series when the narrator would change, it didn't bother me so much. But the particular narrator for this book, oh my gosh, I did not like. No offense, man, but your character voices just irk me so much. So that really took me out of my reading experience. Another reason why I've listened to most of these books because they're so long. But the last book I'm definitely going to physically read because I don't want to ruin anything about my experience with that. So I will be physically reading the last book at some point before the year is over. But other than that, this is a really great book. I really enjoyed it. Very emotional, very powerful. Yes, it was great. So 4 stars. Alright, so now we are moving on to the 4.5 star books. So I have 2 4.5 stars, and I'm going to go ahead and get into the first one, which Karin Slaughter is back. This one I do have a physical copy of from the library. So this is the final book in the Grant County series that I mentioned earlier, Beyond Reach. Now this was the best of the bunch. Of all 6 books in the series, this was the best one. I thought the mystery was really compelling. I thought the characters were going through some really dark and serious stuff, but also some beautiful character moments as well. There's a lot of resolution that I was looking for. And then there's one thing that happened that I don't want to talk about because I want you to just, like, if you do decide to pick these up, which I encourage you, if you can stomach it, give these books a try. The first book is called Blindsided, and again, it's by Karin Slaughter. But if you're looking for, like, a good mystery series, it's, like, kind of like a police procedural kind of thing. It follows, you know, the chief of police and one of the officers, and then the chief of police ex-wife, who is like the county coroner, and she's also a pediatrician in the town. It follows the 3 of them as they go through these different mysteries, these different crimes, these different murders, and try to figure out who did it. I encourage you to read these books if you can stomach really gruesome violence and like depictions of violence and things like that, because this ending made it totally worth it. And I'm so glad that the Will Trent series has characters from this in it because I have a lot of questions that I need answered. So, yes, 4.5 stars. It was really, really great. One of my favorite mysteries of the year. Next up, my only Stephen King book of the month. I was really excited to read The Dark Half. I've been wanting to read it for months. And Tony's Horror Corner, I believe that's his tag on Instagram, he has a really great page. He's a Stephen King collector, and he has so many good posts and things like that. He was hosting a read-along on Instagram, and I just had to join because I've been wanting to read this book for a while. This is called The Dark Half. It is one of Stephen King's like lesser-known books, which I think is so wrong because it was so good. Like I said, I've read like 20, probably like 25 Stephen King books now, and this is definitely like in my top 10. I wouldn't say it's in my top 5 because the top 5 Stephen King books are like some of my favorites of all time. But man, The Dark Half was so good. Oh, it was so good. And I feel like it's so underrated. Nobody talks about this book in like Stephen King circles as much as they talk about like It and The Stand and The Shining and blah, 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 blah. But The Dark Half was incredible. I thought it was really well paced. I thought the characters were really well done. I think it's a very personal book for Stephen King. So what this book is about is it follows a writer. Obviously, it's personal that way. But it's even more personal because the writer in the book had like a pseudonym that he was writing different kind of fiction under. And at one point, like, some guy finds out that he is that same author that's writing under the pseudonym, and so he like blackmails him or whatever to like let the secret out or whatever, and he just does it. And he like there's this joke where it's like George Stark is dead or whatever. He's the pseudonym, and that I think is really personal to Stephen King because Stephen King also was writing under a pseudonym Richard Bachman, and that was eventually outed, and so he had to stop writing under that name. But yeah. And it's so gripping because, like, the whole point is the Dark Half, which is the pseudonym, comes to life and is, like, wreaking havoc on everyone who he feels like is responsible for his death. And it was so good. I loved it. One of my favorite Stephen Kings of the year, for sure. And, yeah, it was fantastic. 4.5 stars for me. All right, so now we have come to my last book to talk about, and it is my only 5-star book of the month of September, and you guys, it is my favorite book of the year so far. Oh my gosh, I was so excited when Orbit Books agreed to send me a copy of Jade Legacy. This book is massive, and it took me a while to read, but this book is amazing. If you don't know about this series, it's called the Greenbone Saga. It begins with Jade City, and then Jade War, and then Jade Legacy comes out November 30th. And this book was so good. It was everything I wanted it to be. So to describe the Greenbone Saga a little bit, it's like, and I've heard it described this way by a lot of people, so I'm not like coming up with this or whatever, but it's like The Godfather with martial arts and like Asian inspiration and like a bit of magic. That's what it is, and it is everything I wanted it to be. The first two books were really good, 4.5 stars, solid, but Jade Legacy was just phenomenal. It was so well done. It is one of the best conclusions to a series that I've ever read. There was so much emotion, so many like family dynamics that were so beautifully executed, some heartbreaking moments, some amazing action, some huge twists. Like, this book has like everything, you know? It has everything, and I'll be talking about this book to the day I die because it is fantastic. If you take away no other recommendations from me in this video, please give the Greenbone Saga a try because it is one of my favorite series of all time. It is by Fonda Lee, and like I said, the last book in the trilogy does come out November 30th, which you've got time. You have like 2 months. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead, pick up these books. They're amazing. But anyway, that concludes my September wrap-up. It was a really great reading month. I'm really proud of the books that I read, as well as, you know, I really enjoyed the books I read. I'm glad I got a classic in there. I'm trying to challenge myself to read 1 classic a month, and I've done it 2 months in a row now, and I'm very excited about that. But I have some really exciting reading plans for October, so I will be coming at you guys with an October TBR probably in the next few days or so be looking out for that. Again, thank you so much for being here watching this video. I'm so excited to finally make a booktube. It's been like one of my things I've wanted to do, like on my bucket list for years now, and I'm just so excited to be here talking about books with you wonderful people. So that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.